Today, I'm going to tell you about the first NBA and NFL games. I will first tell you about the history of the NBA. A group of men who controlled arenas in the big U.S. cities met on June 6, 1946 and formed the Basketball Association of America. They weren't basketball people. Their experience was with hockey, ice shows, circuses, and rodeos. They wanted to build on the success of college basketball. 11 franchises were formed to compete in 2 divisions. Each team paid a $10,000 franchise fee. The new Basketball Association of America, 3 years later, became the NBA. Now, let's talk about the first NBA teams of game. There were 2 divisions in the BAA. The teams in the East were the Boston Celtics, the Philadelphia Warriors, Providence Steamrollers, Washington Capitals, New York Knickerbockers, and Toronto Huskies. The teams in the West were the Pittsburgh Ironmen, Chicago Stags, Detroit Falcons, St. Louis Bombers, and Cleveland Rebels. The first ball game was the Toronto Huskies hosting the New York Knickerbockers at Maple Leaf Gardens on November 1st, 1946. The game had an attendance of 7,090. Now, I will tell you about that game. To promote the game, the Huskies ran newspaper ads showing a picture of 6'8" George Nordstrand, Toronto's tallest player, that asked, "Can you top this?" Any fan taller than Nordstrand would be granted free admission to the season opener. Ossie Schwartzman of the Knicks scored the first basket of the game and helped the Knicks jump to a 6-0 lead. The Knicks had a big lead, 33-18, before Huskies player coach Ed Sadowski led his team to cut the gap to 37-29 at halftime. The Knicks won that night, 68-66, but the Huskies took a late lead before the Knicks beat them. The top scorers were Sadowski with 18 points for the Huskies and New York's Leo Gottlieb with 14. Now let's talk about the history of the NFL. Football had been around for a few years before several professional teams got together in 1920 to form a league. These teams met in Canton, Ohio and founded formed the American Professional Football Conference, which was later called the National Football League. These teams were the Akron Pros, the Decatur Staleys, the Buffalo All-Americans, the Chicago Cardinals, the Rock Island Independents, the Dayton Triangles, the Rochester Jeffersons, the Canton Bulldogs, the Detroit Heralds, the Cleveland Tigers, the Chicago Tigers, the Hammond Pros, the Columbus Panhandles, and the Muncie Flyers. Let's talk about the first pro football games. There were 2 games that might be the first NFL game because historians aren't sure which came first. One was the Dayton Triangles versus the Columbus Panhandles. It was played in Dayton in Triangle Park on Sunday, October 3rd, 1920. The outcome of the game was Dayton 14, Columbus 0. The game was very close. The game was hardly fought, and it was only in the second half that the Triangles were able to show their superiority. Early in the third period, the Triangles got the ball on their own 35-yard line. Then Lou Parlow broke loose and raced to the Panhandle 10-yard line. Frank Bacon gained 3, and then Parlow took the ball and lost. About the middle of the last quarter, Bacon fielded upon eyes on 40. He dodged and squirmed his way through the entire Columbus team and scored. 60-yard return. Now let's talk about the other game. The other possible first game was the Rock Island Independents versus the Muncie Flyers. It was played at Douglas Islands in Rock Island, Illinois on Sunday, October 3rd, 1920. The Rock Island Independents swamped the Muncie Flyers by lopsided 45-0. 3,100 people attended the game. Arnie Lyman, former Minnesota great, scored 3 touchdowns in the game. The Independents blocked 3 punts in the first quarter to score 3 touchdowns. The Independents used their bench throughout the second half, but they still managed to add 2 more touchdowns to their total. The Flyers only got 2 first downs for the entire game, and one of those came when Rock Island was caught offsides. That ends my talk on the first NFL and NBA games.